you just go to statcrunch.com and then log in. So I already have my login and password right here. So I'm going to sign in. And this will bring you to the Statcrunch homepage. So right now, what we're actually going to do is start off in crops. So we'll just keep this open in this tab, but go back to the course website or open up the course website in crops. And this is where you're always going to get data files for each work or each week's tutorial and homework. So go to resources, and you're going to notice a new folder called Statcrunch Labs. And here, the only thing I have loaded so far is this data file that we're going to be working with. It's called Lab 1 Statcrunch Basics. But by the time you get here, it'll have the this file along with the homework file and instructions that you're going to be working on. Because we always do two separate files, one for the tutorial and then another one for the homework. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this and just save the file and make sure you know where it's saved. Because what we're going to do is save it and then open it up in Statcrunch. And actually, before I go any farther, kind of a trick that I think would work well for using these videos or tutorials is to watch the video all the way through once. And then when you start working on the homework, maybe have the video open where you can play and pause it while you're working on sections of the homework. Particularly if you get stuck on a certain place, you can go back to the video tutorial and look at it. But I always suggest looking through the tutorial all the way at least once, just so you have a firm grasp on where everything is and kind of the flow of what you're going to be doing with the homework. Okay, so anyway, so once you have Statcrunch opened and you're logged in, go ahead and click on Open Statcrunch. And to import this data file, you're going to go Data, Load Data, from File, on my computer. And hopefully you remember where you downloaded it. Here you just click Browse. And I always download it in a little folder called Downloads on my desktop. And so it's right here. I actually downloaded it a couple of times, but we'll just use this one right here. So once you have that in there, you can just keep everything else the same. Don't need to change any settings. And just click Load File. So this will bring up the data file that's stored in the Excel sheet, but it'll bring it up into Statcrunch. And the number one thing you should do whenever you open up a file is go ahead and save it, so you have your own copy of it. So to do that, go Data, Save File, and you can name it whatever you want. This is the file name itself with the Excel file. I strongly suggest putting in Lab1 and then followed by your name. This will make it easiest for me to sort through them once you have it done. So go ahead and put Lab1 followed by your name. Of course, this is what you do with the homework as well. So you can click override existing file. It doesn't really matter here. I like to keep that off though, just to make sure in case I am saving in the same file that I'm not ruining the original copy. So go ahead and click Save. And so then you can close that window, and basically where you're saving it is if you go back to your Statcrunch home and you go to Statcrunch, My Statcrunch right here, and click on My Data, it'll now show up here. So I have quite a few of these, but you can find right here at the top, Lab1-Ross Avila. So if it's your first data file, that'll be the only one you have in here, and then you can click on it and access it whenever you want to. So once you have your own personal version of the file, go ahead and go back to the data file here. And then, well, let me just go ahead and explain a little bit of what this data is. So this is some data I got from Psych 1, has about 130 data points. It's pretty easy to tell what most of these are, but let me go ahead and explain the ones, especially the ones that may not make as much sense. So age is obvious enough, age of participants, gender, woman, male, woman. And sometimes there's some mistakes in here. You notice that someone put in a 9, it's probably a 19. That's okay. We're just going to go ahead and ignore that for now because it doesn't really matter for today's exercises. Here we have ethnicity like Latino, East Asian, African American, Caucasian. I put in here what's your favorite music, and people answer with their favorite music. Here I put in how many Facebook minutes do you spend per week. So basically how many minutes per week are you on Facebook? How many Facebook friends do you have? And it's kind of all over the map, but we'll get into some of these. What type of car do you drive? So it could be economy car, truck, or I don't drive a car. How many minutes do you spend driving per week? This was per day on average. How many traffic tickets do you have? How many accidents do you have? So all these are sort of clustered into car knowledge. What's their GPA? This was an interesting one. I asked them what percentile they thought they were in terms of how good their GPA was. So that's something we'll look at later. Does their actual GPA figure into what they think, how they think they stack up to others on average? So for example, if they said 50%, they figure they're just average. If they said 70, it means they think they're in the 70th percentile or have a higher GPA than 70% of people. If we scroll over here, there's just a couple of more. We have here, how many times do they go to parties per month? And then how many drinks do they imbibe in per week? How many alcoholic drinks do they imbibe in per week? So just some interesting data to get us started here. And we're just going to analyze some of these today. So one thing you might want to do with your data sets, besides just sort of getting to know them, is to look at certain frequencies. So a frequency is just a count of how many groups or how many people you have in each group per variable. So a really common one we're always interested in, how many women versus men do we have in our data set? So here we're going to do a table. So if you go to stat, this is where you're going to find all the different statistical analyses that we can do. And we're going to stick with some really simple ones today. We're mostly just going to look at summary stats and tables. Summary stats is for looking at things like means and standard deviations. Tables is for looking at things like frequencies. So that's what we're going to do first. What's the frequency of women and men in this data set? So click on stat, tables, frequencies, and then you would just put in gender. So here, this is how a lot of the menus go. You can put in one column that you want to see, so we can look at different frequencies of age, gender, ethnicity, and if you wanted to click on multiple of these, you could by holding down either the control button in Windows or the command button on Macs and clicking multiple ones. But we're just going to click on gender. And for right now, we can ignore the rest of this. Right here, it'll have what is selected for output. So it'll say the frequency of gender. It'll also say the relative frequency. And actually, I think a more interesting one is if you click on frequency, then hold down either the control or command button and click on percent of total. Because that'll just tell us what total, the percent of total is male and female. So again, you can click on one of these, but here I like to click on frequency, then hit control or command, hold that down and click percent of total to select both of those. And you can order them by going from least to greatest, greatest to least, or just by the order they are in the worksheet. It doesn't really matter for us though. So here we're going to go ahead and click compute. It'll open here a small little extra window that shows our output. So basically in this data set, we have 53 men, 82 women, and so women comprise 60.7% of our total sample, and guys 39.3% if we round up. So once you have a frequency table, what I like to do is you could either, well actually the easiest way I think to do this would be to, we'll sort of skip that, we'll do the easiest way here, is to select all of this, because we're going to copy and paste this into another program. So the easiest way to do that is to hit either Control A or Command A to select everything. Then hit Control C or Command C, depending on whether you have a Windows or Mac, to copy it all. And then I like to use Microsoft Word documents, and that's what I'm going to have you often turn in with your homework assignment. So if we open up a Microsoft Word document here, and I'll kind of scooch over here so we can easily go back and forth between the two. You can just hit Command V on Mac or Control V on Windows. So there it is. So you notice it pops into a nice little table with the title and everything. And so oftentimes when you're doing homework, you'll be creating tables and then copying and pasting them into a Microsoft Word document. So for right now, we'll just go ahead and minimize that, but we have that for later. And then once we're done with this, we can go ahead and just close that. So that's how to create a frequency table. And you can do that in a lot of ways. For example, we could look at the frequency of how many different age groups we have and compute that. And one thing I forgot is I didn't want relative frequency, because every time you open one of these things, it goes back to its default findings. So that's what we did age, but again, we wanted frequency in percent of total. That I think just makes for a cleaner output. There we go. So here we go. So basically it's saying that we have some people who obviously put in some wrong data points, but that's fine. We had 6 people who are 17, comprised about 4.5% of the sample. Most of them were 18, about 57% of the sample, with the following 19, 20, 21, 22 comprising the rest of the sample. So again, you could copy and paste this into Word if you like, but I just wanted to show you another frequency table to show you that that's pretty much how it goes. One cool thing we can do with the frequency table, though, is to order it by different groups. So let's say we wanted to know how many 19, 20, 18, whatever year olds we have who are men versus women. So here we can open up another frequency table, again, tables, frequency. And we put in the same thing, age, we want to select frequency, percent of total, but then we have this little group by option. So here if we just clicked a computer, it would show us the previous table where it just shows different age groups. But we could, for example, group by gender to see how many age groups we have between men and women. So here, hit compute, and it does one for man and one for woman. And so here, just at a glance, we can tell certain things, like, for example, of course, we have more women than men, but perhaps, I see the oldest guy here is 22, the oldest woman here is 21, and apparently the two people who put in false data points were women in the data set. That might, in fact, make it easier for us to find those if we were interested in that. So again, to save that in there, I'm just going to sort of get in the habit of this, because let's say this was an important output. You can always just select it, hit Control or Command A to select everything, Control or Command C to copy it, and then Control or Command V to put it in your Word file. So you're just putting in tables in there that you might send for later. Of course, when you're doing homeworks, it'll be very specific in what types of tables you want to save for later. I think I'll minimize that. Okay, so that's a little bit on frequencies. Here's one more aspect of frequencies, and this is also just sort of teaching you stuff about these windows in general, because a lot of them are very similar. But let's say that we only wanted to look at women. It didn't want to have men in our table. Again, we could go back to frequencies, hit age. We're going to group by gender once more. We'll get the statistics we want. And then where is where you put in any type of qualifiers. Maybe people you want to include or people you want to exclude, or maybe age groups. For example, we'll play around with this in at least two ways here. But let's say first we're just again interested in the different age groups of women. So here you're going to click Build, and this is going to open up what's called an expression box, where you're going to put in the command basically whatever needs to be satisfied for you to look at that individual's data. So what I mean by that is, let's put in gender. So we click on gender and we go add column. And what we want to say is we only want to look at people whose gender equals, and here we want to put this in parentheses because it is text, woman, in parentheses. So basically we're saying what data do we want? We want those whose gender equals woman. Go ahead and click OK. And so right now we have quite a lot of things set up. We're looking at different age groups, grouped by gender, and we're only looking at women. So go ahead and compute. And right there you get the dialog box that is basically only women, just like we wanted. You could even, this is another aspect of the where function. Let's do another table, frequency table. And again, you have to set it up each time, but it's just something you'll get used to. So put in gender. Let's say that we just want to look at those correct data points. And remember, we had one that was a 7 and one that was a 9 that were clearly incorrect. And again, we want to select the statistics that we want. So here, we could say, well, we want only those with accurate ages, so we could put in that we want the age to be at least, or basically to be greater than, we'll put in 10 years old, because the 7 and the 9 were clearly inaccurate. Or we could even put in 16, because we just had 17-year-olds as the the true scores, or ones that seem very likely. So here we're saying again, what do we want to look at? We want to just look at those people with ages that are greater than 16. So if we click OK and hit compute now, it's going to exclude those two data points that it said they were age 7 and 9. And again, it has it for man and women because we didn't select just one gender. So that's a bit on frequency tables. I know that seems like maybe quite a lot right at the beginning, but these different qualities, what columns you're selecting, the where option, basically selecting what type of data you're interested in, the group by option, is in almost every single window. So if you really master these three aspects, and then also what type of statistic you want, which will be different between windows, but these three aspects are the same across most windows, you've mastered a lot of what it is to do analyses in Statcrunch. So that's a bit about frequencies. Now let's get into some actual statistics, like means and standard deviations. So where you're going to find those is if you go to Stat and go to Summary Statistics or Summary Stats. And to get a statistic, for example, let's say we want to know the mean age of all of our individuals. Here, since our ages are stored in a column, we have a column of ages. We're going to go Summary Stats, Columns. And again, we're just interested in age. We could select a bunch of things to do at once, but we'll just do age. And also, why not? Since we'll use the same tack, we don't want to include the 7 or 9-year-old. So we could again go age. We want age to be greater than, oops, I forgot to put age first. We can just hit backspace here. So age, add column, greater than, let's put a 10 here. So get rid of that 7 and 9-year-old. And here it'll select what type of statistics we want. So right now it has selected quite a few of them. N means how many participants are in the total sample, mean, variance, standard deviation, standard error, median, range, min, max, first quartile, third quartile. That's just a lot. So what I like to do is select just the stuff that we actually need so it's not get confusing. And all we really need here is the N, the mean, and the standard deviation. And again, I'm selecting multiple of these just by holding down the command or the control key. So here we go. So we're looking at age, we're getting rid of that 7 or 9-year-old, and we're just looking at N, mean, and standard deviation. Go ahead and hit compute. And that's another nice thing about when we just select what we want. If we had all that stuff, it would be a huge table. But here we go. It's a nice succinct table where we're looking at age. We have 130 people who reported their age. The mean is 18.5 years old, and the standard deviation is about 0.9. So that gives us a clue about what the age is, and the standard deviation just sort of gives us a clue that really if the standard deviation is below 1, this isn't a lot of variance in terms of age. That most people are right around 18, 19, 17 years old. So again, that's a little bit on the descriptives, and pretty much anything we can do with the frequency table, we can do with the descriptives table. So for example, if we wanted to again look at age, and maybe again we just wanted the N, mean, and standard deviation, we could do things like group it by gender. So see the mean ages of both genders. And I'll leave in the 7 or 9 just to save us some time. So if we hit compute there, it's just going to give us one graph, one for men, one for women. The men have an average age of 18.7, or actually 18.8 if we round it up, where the women have an average age of 18.1. So they're a little bit on the younger side compared to guys. So in that way, as you can see, a lot of these little tricks, like grouping, the where statements, are shared across a lot of these different dialog boxes. So I'll go ahead and close that. You, of course, always want to keep your data sets current. You can just hit save. If you wanted to, you could give it a new name. So you could say something like, for example, we had Lab 1 Ross Avila. Here we could put in modified or just 2. Just put in 2 like that. Or you could even put in the time. See, it's like 1. Well, I don't know if you can put in columns. Actually, I'll save off on that. But you could just put in, modified. And then again, if you save it, it's always going to save it right here with your data. So I reloaded this. This is just my home field. Here it says Ross Allen modified. And that might be a good thing for you to do just so that you can keep track of what data sets are from the original that you got from crops and which ones are the ones that you've affected in some way. Okay, so that's it for this little run. Again, we're not going to be doing a whole lot of stuff, but just to rehearse just how to open and save data files, how to split and stack columns, and how to run frequency and summary statistics, which of course in here, summaries and tables. So that's it for this week. Really what I want you guys to be able to do is just get a little bit familiar with this. And also I'm providing you with a big data set here just so you can play around with it. If you'd already started to messing around with stuff like graphing things, go for it. Or if you're interested in figuring out other types of summary statistics or tables, or even t-tests if you wanted to go that far, go for it. So go ahead and mess around with the data file a little bit if you want to, but definitely make sure to review the homework and complete that and then send it to me. Oh, and so the last part, how to send me your homework, very important. That actually is very easy. Basically, all you need to do is click on this little button right here, where it says a little arrow going out, Oh, and it says it's not currently being shared. This sometimes you have to set this up to be shared. You can go to properties by clicking on the little I here. And in fact, it says share with everyone, no. So what you want to do, if this is you, if it doesn't say share with everyone, this is probably because I saved it as a new data file. You go to edit properties. Might take a little while here. And then it says, do you want to share with people? Just click yes. And then you can just scroll to the very bottom, click update. You can close this out. And now you can send it to other people. So if you, again, click on this little arrow out, it'll say, how do you want to share? For this class, you're always just going to email it to me. So click on email. And you can use whatever email service you want. I strongly suggest using Google and sending it from your UC Merced account. And that's just because oftentimes when I get email students trying to email me from their personal accounts, it gets caught in a spam filter. But if you want to make sure your email gets to me, click on your Google account. It'll open up Gmail here. And select your school account that you want to email it from, and then just email it directly to me. So here it's opening it up for me. It has it coming from my UC Merced account, and of course you want to send it to my UC Merced account, which is just ravila@ucmerced.edu. And it'll also mention the web address in the email itself. And you can keep it here as Statcrunch. That's really easy for me to recognize. And I kind of prefer that. That way I can order my emails and make sure that I'm getting all the Statcrunch files in an orderly manner, and your email doesn't get sort of lost in all my other ones. So that's a very important part. I'm glad I sort of remember to mention that, is when you send your homework files to me, you're going to be sending partly your Word document, which of course you can email to me separately, but then also your actual data set, which you want to make sure that it's open, it's shared by clicking on the I here and clicking shared. And then you want to send it to me by clicking on this little thing and then clicking email, and then email it to me. So that should be everything you need to accomplish the first homework.